Hi, my name is Jonas. Today I'm going to share an EQ technique that I learned about 20 years ago. It's a way to decide which exact frequency to cut or boost in a mix. Keep in mind that EQ is always a bit of a subjective thing in music, so do not blindly follow any rules. Always use your ears and then decide if it makes things better in your context. Also, to be able to hear what you're actually doing when mixing, it's best to use proper monitors and an acoustically treated room. Something I do not really have at the moment because I already took down some treatment because I'm in the process of moving to another studio. If you don't have proper monitors or room, it's best to also cross-reference with good headphones. I'm always using the Sennheiser HD600s, but there are of course a lot of other options as well. Just keep in mind to not use the consumer grade headphones because they usually boost the lows and the highs a little bit to make the music sound better. But what you want to hear is the actual reality, not something that is made to sound better. So keep in mind when you're mixing that you're not actually fighting your monitoring instead. So that being said, what do you need for this technique? Well, you'll need a parametric EQ. Most of them come in at least 3 bands, but you'll see 4 bands quite a lot and some plugins have a lot more. So does it mean that more bands are better? Well, not really. It just gives you some more options to make corrections. But keep in mind, if you have to make that many corrections, maybe you should take a step back and look at your source material and see if it can be improved before you have to do all these kind of corrections. Keep in mind, less is more. Let's get to the technique now. I'm going to use this bassline as an example. I made it quite muddy deliberately. Muddy in this case is a term to indicate that it has a little bit too much mid-low, which doesn't really sound that great. And we're going to find out which frequency exactly we have to cut to make it sound a little bit better again. Let's first listen to the muddy version. So we'll start by selecting a band and increasing the Q factor quite a lot, almost to the max. The Q factor in this case means the narrowness of the cut or the boost. Then we're going to increase the gain a lot. And as you can see, we get this very narrow boost around the frequency center that we select here. And now we can sweep around. And what the technique actually is sweep around until you find the frequency that is peaking a lot, maybe even going to distort. So when you're doing this, maybe it's best to decrease your output first, otherwise you might blow up your monitors in worst case. We will sweep through the spectrum until we can hear a frequency that really sticks out and maybe even distorts. Let's do this. So first I'm going to decrease it again. Let's make this bassline loop. And now let's boost. At this frequency, it's actually distorting, so there's a really good chance that we found the right spot now. So what you do next is actually invert the sign of the gain. So instead of plus boosting it, we're going to make it negative and making a cut. So now we have a quite narrow cut at the frequency that we think is problematic. Let's listen to what happens. We can increase the signal again as well. And what you can do now is decrease the narrowness of the Q and then also decrease the amount of gain reduction you are using, just to make it a little bit less extreme, and just do that until you think it sounds good. What good means in this context, it's up to you. I think it's always best to think about the context, the other instruments that are in your mix, and of course A/B reference it with a track that you think sounds really good, just to make sure that you're not going off the track too much. So let's change the settings a little bit. Now let's go back and forward a little bit to hear the difference. So in this case, we could solve our problem by making a specific cut at around 122 Hertz with a quite narrow Q and quite a lot of gain reduction. In some cases, you will need more cuts at specific points or a cut and a boost, but the technique remains the same. You go through it band by band. First, make a narrow boost, sweep through the spectrum until you can hear the frequency that you think is problematic. Then flip the sign of the gain. So instead of boosting, you cut, and then you made a cut at the exact spot that you need. Let's do another example, this time with a vocal that sounds a little bit too nasal, that has actually a bit too much mid-high. Let's listen to it.
You didn't say, oh, you didn't need me, holding on to you. You took your time, just like you do.
And now we'll use the same technique. Set the Q to be very narrow, boost the gain, and then sweep through the spectrum until we find the problematic frequency.
You didn't say, oh, you didn't need me, holding on to you. You took your time, just like you do. And now you say, ooh, and now you need me, holding on to you. I am falling through.
I think we found that one. Let's cut it.
I am falling through. Don't wanna lose this feeling.
Let's go a bit back and forward to really hear the difference.
You didn't say, oh, you didn't need me, holding on to you. You took your time, just like you do. And now you see, ooh, and now you need me, holding on to you. I am falling through. Yeah, I am falling through. I am falling through. I am falling through.
Of course, you can use the inverse of this technique as well and use it to find frequencies that are maybe a little bit too weak and you want to boost. But usually I tend to use this for actually cutting frequencies. When I boost, I tend to do it a little bit more broadband and I'm a little bit more careful. Unless you really want to go for special effects, of course, because then anything is possible. And you can actually even use this technique to find the interesting frequencies that you want to target. One of the typical special effects examples you can use this way is making this telephone or radio voice. Let's do that. So first we will cut off all the lows with a high pass filter till about 500 Hertz maybe. Then we'll do the same with the highs, but of course the other way around. A low pass filter in this case. And then we boost everything in the middle with a pretty narrow Q. And then you get this typical telephone effect.
I am falling
So a few final remarks. As you could hear, you can have some pretty extreme boosts when you're doing this technique, so be careful that your volume is not too high or you will hurt your ears or your equipment. And another question that maybe some of you may have is, why am I not simply looking at the frequency spectrum? Because nowadays in all these modern plugins you can perfectly see what is happening, and I say of course you can use it as a guideline, but in the end it's best to trust your ears. Just in case that maybe the visualization is a little bit off or a bit too extreme, or you're not really sure how to interpret it, it's best to use your ears and use those to make your final decision if this is the right spot to make your cut or your boost. And of course, finally, always A/B reference with other tracks that you know sound good, just to make sure that you're not going off track way too much. And that's it again for today. If you want more like this, do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to be notified as soon as a new video goes online, click the bell button. Bye bye.